Andy Sugg.
Honored.
We are here in beautiful Hawaii, atop the mountain with Diamond Head in the background. And it's symbolic because for me, I do not like to fly. And so I hopped on a plane for 11 hours from Boston to get here to Hawaii to see my wonderful friend Andy and Lisa. And Andy has agreed to be our first guest here on the Inspire Lounge.
Honored.
Leadership Unfiltered. When I first met you, your nickname was Sport. And you knew so much about sports, and that was always in the back of your mind about what you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you moved to Boston, you started play testing software, which you didn't know anything about. Tell us a little bit about your mindset, about when you started that first job, and especially for the listeners who not quite sure what they want to do, but how did you kind of get started?
Yeah, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do either. I moved to Boston in January of 1984 and met some friends of my brother's in a bar. The second night I was there with my buddy, Brian, and one of them was working at Spinnaker Software because we were chatting about what we did, and I said I didn't have a job. He said, oh, we were looking for people, and literally 2 weeks later I started at Spinnaker. So it was kind of like, wow, didn't take much to get a job.
Yeah.
So I started working at Spinnaker, as you said, as a quality assurance guy, testing the games, and then was given a promotion to work on a product team where I was sort of editing documentation and that sort of thing. And I just wasn't happy in the job. And I had always in the back of my mind thought, I really think I want to work in television. Okay. And so, I don't know, I was probably about 2.5 years into the job when I spent the weekend in my apartment alone, just sort of thinking about what it was I was going to do with my life. And I decided I wanted to get into sports television. And so I went in that day and the next day and talked to my boss and said, I'm not happy here and I want to try something new.
And did you talk to anyone else? Did you kind of come to this decision?
It was really a lot of inner thoughts and conversations with myself. And no, I mean, it was a decision I had to make for myself.
And had you had any experience with television?
Zero.
Okay.
Yeah, zero.
So you knew you wanted to try this. You told your boss, hey, I'm not really happy here. Did you leave? Did you give you notice that day?
I did. I think I worked there for like 3 more weeks and then I left, and I didn't have another job.
And I love this because that's part of it. That so much of what we teach is about mindset. It's sort of, you knew, you had gotten a promotion, so you knew there was going to be more of the same of this, but I wasn't really that happy.
No, and I was 22, so I 23, so I had
great time.
Yeah, I felt like I had some years ahead of me.
So you said, hey, I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to try television. So how did you get into television?
So I just started networking at the time. Back in 1984, there was nothing. This thing called the internet did not exist. Cell phones did not exist. Yeah. So I just started networking. My brother, who was working at a private school in Boston, knew one of his parents who was the general manager at one of the television stations in town. So he put me in touch with him. And then I cold called, sent letters to the 3 sports guys in town, the 3 affiliate sports guys in town. And went in and talked to the guy who my brother knew, and they didn't have any jobs, but they kept me in mind. And then in the meantime, I was sort of hounding these guys, and only one of them called me back, Mike Lynch, who was at the ABC affiliate. And he finally called me back and he said, why don't you come on in and we can talk? And I went in and we talked. He could tell I really was passionate about sports and I knew a lot about sports. And he gave me an internship, off the books internship. Okay. I went in after the 6 o'clock newscast 3 or 4 nights a week and just learned as much as I could, and worked with some guys that have gone on to very bigger and better things in the business. We always call ourselves like the for the NFL fans, they know the NFL class of '83. It's it was a pretty
amazing class.
Yeah, if I say so myself. So
I can say that for you.
Yeah, thanks. And then in the meantime, a job opened up at that other television station, TV 38. And that station was one of the original super stations. So they had a job. Was the receptionist at the place.
Right. So here's a guy, loves sports, all excited about television. And they say, after all this time, all this networking, they're like, hey, you can come in and answer the phones.
And I said, sign me up.
Excellent. And I think that's the first part. What was in your mindset, right? I mean,
well, the money was horrifically bad. Yeah. It was, even back then, I was taking home less than $200 a week. So you can do the math. My parents were very, I was fortunate they could help sort of subsidize me in a way, because they were very supportive.
Right.
So I got the job as the intern, as the receptionist. And the best part of that job is that everybody who came in the building had to walk by me. Right. So I got to know everybody who worked there.
And that's what I love when you think about opportunities, right? So you've worked hard, you've gotten yourself in the door, take advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely.
You know, you could have had the mindset of, oh man, I really want to be on camera, or I want to be doing these other things, but you paid your dues and you took advantage of the opportunity. You know what? Hey, oh, I don't, you know, I'm the receptionist. Hey, no, I'm the receptionist. Every person who comes in, calls this place, I'm the first person they meet. And you could use that as an opportunity.
And every opportunity I got when I wasn't answering the phones, I would go downstairs to the sports guys and sports women and just say, hey, what are you doing? I'd go into the edit bays and talk to the editors about what they were editing and how they were doing it. So even in I think I only answered the phones about 3.5, 4 months. Okay. But even in those few months, I was learning as much as I could about the business.
When I talk with a lot of young people, especially those who've gone through COVID and are sitting home working from home, they talk a lot about that nervousness around networking. And, you know, walking into these crowded rooms where you don't know anybody, could be in a new city, could be a new job, you know, you don't know a lot of people. Do you have any advice for kind of getting over those jitters, or
well, I think we all have those jitters at some point in our lives. I mean, Lisa, I don't think has ever had those jitters. She can walk to her room and own it. But I think most people have the jitters. And, you know, you mentioned COVID, Erin. I think that, and this may sound like an old person's perspective, but I say get out of the house or get out of your apartment and go into the office if you can a few days a week and have that social interaction. There's just, it's just a different vibe. Yeah. It's just, you can see people's body language. You can see their expressions. You don't have the option to turn your camera on and off. I mean, I think that was one of the things. I mean, the work from home thing, I think is great to a certain degree, but I think that the pendulum has swung a little bit too far to one side, where people are just happy sitting in their pajamas, you know, and banging away on a keyboard and getting on a Zoom call every now and again. And I think that human interaction and socialization is really, really important to get over those fears of walking into a room.
Us, you know, we've been friends for all these years now because of, you know, we work together in the trenches, and you know,
when we were working at that software company, you know, when we were getting ready for a product rollout, we were sleeping like a lot of us were sleeping at the place.
I had a cab pick me up at 5:30 in the morning because the tea wasn't running yet. We had to run the machine.
You're like working 16-hour days, and so friendships for a lifetime are forged in those kind of moments, and you learn a lot about people when you know what's hitting the fan. So I think that when you're sitting and looking at a camera on your computer, it's just a little different. And so I would encourage as much as you can to get out and network with people.
And so you 3 or 4 months in, you've been learning as much as you can. So now what happens?
Job opens in the sports department as the quote unquote sports secretary.
There you go, moving up.
And so I took a lot of grief, but I applied for the job and I got that job.
Awesome.
And so I went down there, and that was sort of the next step, right? So I was doing I wasn't typing and that sort of thing, but I was doing like clerical stuff, like back in the day, ordering tape. Yeah. The Red Sox had a television network all over New England, and I was sort of coordinating with a different point of contacts at the different stations in Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire, Connecticut, I think, just sort of what they needed to know as far as commercial breaks and this and that. So I was doing a lot of different stuff. Again, whatever they needed me to do.
So I think you had a winning attitude. You took advantage of your opportunities, and you were in. And now it's just make the most of your opportunities. Yeah. And so obviously once they start talking with you and you're seeing your incredible knowledge of sports, you're like, okay, let's give this guy a shot. And you continue to progress.
Associate producer and then producer, and doing live events and Bruins games and college hockey, the Beanpot.
Which you won an Emmy for.
Our first child was born the day after the Beanpot final in 1993. So that was.
So were you did you make it to the hospital in time after the game?
I did. We had made plans, but my wife, by the way, Lisa, who I met at work, so that was another
Another plus.
huge benefit of that first job. Second job, yeah, the night we knew that she was expecting right around the final of the Beanpot in February. And so we had made plans. There were no cell phones, but there was a phone in the remote truck out in front of the garden. And so she had that number.
You had a baby phone.
We had a baby phone. And I was upstairs meeting with our announcers and our director. And somebody came running upstairs and said, Lisa, she's on her way to the hospital.
4 more minutes?
So my wife, she's a warrior. She drove herself to the hospial. And I met her there. Yeah.
The life of television, right?
The life of television,
right. The show must go on.
That's right.
And so how long were you at 38?
I think I was there for about 8.5 years. Okay. Yeah, 8.5 years.
And you had worked up the ranks, was that right, to executive producer?
I was producer there, producing live events. And then our studio host for Bruins, Gene, he had moved on to the NBC affiliate in town as their sports director. And he called me one day and said, do you want to come over and be the EP, the executive producer, of sports there? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so that was sports news, but that was really, that was a different level of stuff.
And another thing that rings through in your career really is about the relationships you have built.
100%.
And it's not, you had to work hard and have those opportunities, and you needed to build up your resume and all of that. And in addition, the networking is as important.
It's huge.
And it's about building those relationships. I know the two of us really work on, giving favors and asking for favors. And it's a two-way street, and you give much before you ask. But I think so much of your career was you're showing up, you're helping others, you're seeing what needs to be done, and you're building up those relationships.
Yeah, any business you're in is a relationship business. I mean, unless you're just like a computer programmer and you're sitting behind a terminal all day. But, the television business, I talked about Mike Lynch. Like Lynchy worked in Boston for 40 years until he retired not too long ago. And he knew that I forever was in his debt because he gave me that first opportunity. And that's all I was looking for. And so he's always been in the back of my mind, and whatever job I've been in, anytime a young person, or not necessarily a young person, but mostly young people who have come to me through friends or through relationships, if they want to sit down and talk, or if there's anything I can do to help them out, I always make time.
And is there anything you would say for that? Often it's not just like, hey, can I pick your brain? I found when people are asking for help, hey, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. This is the kind of industry, not just like I'll do anything, but do you have any advice for people looking to connect?
First of all, I would try to figure out an area of focus. It doesn't mean that that's where you're going to land, but decide sort of what you're going into this thinking you might want to do. Just a brief story. There was a young woman who I got an internship in Boston this past summer. She's the daughter of one of our good friends, and I think she was open to a lot of stuff, but she had said to me when I talked to her initially, I think I'm interested in production, and so on, the behind the camera stuff. And she went to work at a station in Boston, and they loved her, and she got a lot of different experience. She got to go out on shoots with reporters. She got to work on the assignment desk where they dispatched the reporters and the photographers every day. She got to do some editing. She got to go into the control room and see what the directors did. So she got this really like a rainbow of experience at the station. And I think she's sort of figured out what she wants to do. And she's back in school, but my buddy who hired her there says they want to, when she's done, they want to hire her at the station.
And try out different things. And
try out everything.
When you had a great day, what were you doing? And when you had a tough day, what were you doing? And how do you do more of the great day things?
And more than anything else, ask as many questions as you can. You're not going to be a pain, but you won't know what you don't know until you ask. And
that's a great point, right? And you're not expected to know everything. The same way, I also at that computer software company, I had never touched a computer. And that was part of it. I remember raising my hand and saying, well, how do you turn it on? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, how do you turn the computer on, right? I mean, asking those questions, and I think that's, again, that mindset, that confidence, like nobody knows, right?
Yeah, you can't sit there. I've had a lot of interns in my day as a TV person for as many years as I did it. There's lots of kids who would television is kind of a seductive business, so lots of kids want to get into the television business. And I would say probably 40% of them, maybe even less, are kids that when they left, I was like, that you got it. Because they didn't sit around. They didn't wait for any one of us to say, hey, can you help me with? They're like, what can I do?
Nice.
And can I go out and do this? And can, I'll do anything, but here's what I'd really like to learn. And
taking that
so
initiative.
You get, and it makes all the difference in the world for the people, for the people in the office, because you immediately recognize somebody who's just a go-getter, who just really has, and not an obnoxious go-getter, but just somebody who really has a goal in mind and is willing to go for it.
Yeah. They're hungry in a non-offensive way.
Exactly.
Right?
I've had some offensive interns too. Guys and women who just were just so obviously like at all costs. And that gets a little, that's a little off-putting.
Tiring.
Yeah, that's a little off-putting.
And so you were the executive producer, you worked your way up in television. So why are we sitting here in Hawaii? How did this all happen?
So I worked in sports for, another 8 or 9 years, got to go like literally all over the world. Went to a couple Olympics, went to a bunch of Super Bowls, covered World Series, Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals. Like
all the major sport venues.
I even got to spend a month doing the World Cup when it was in the U.S. the last time in 1994. So I got to sort of fulfill like a sports fan's dreams as my job, which was pretty cool. It was a job.
And you started making more than $200 a week.
I was making slightly more than $200 a week.
Parents were happy.
That's right. No more subsidies. And then I got into the news business because my friend Gene, who I mentioned earlier, he had gone onto the news side. He left the sports world on the news side. We started a morning show. I was the EP of that show, and we had a great 8-year run there. And then I left TV and was just kind of like just doing some consulting stuff. I sort of burned out on television. Yeah. And then about 1.5 years later, one of my friends who I had known in Boston for a lot of years, who had moved out here, he married a woman from Hawaii. He called me and said, hey, did you ever think about moving to Hawaii? And I said, I absolutely did not. Never one time.
Yeah.
We'd been here for vacation with the kids. And he said, why don't you come out? I've got this boss who is incredible, and we have a job in our news management team. And so I came out, and his boss was just the most like incredibly charismatic leader. Just like I knew immediately. He's a former football coach. I just knew immediately he was. And my buddy said, I would run through a wall for this guy.
Right. Wow.
So I was here for 4 or 5 days, and I still, when I left, I was like, I'm not going to
Hawaii. It's pretty far.
Like, I'm not moving to Hawaii. Boston to Hawaii is
Lisa's already done her part with.
Yeah. So we went back and we talked about it. We went back and forth and negotiated, and there was lots going on. Our youngest son was still a senior in high school, so we weren't going to move out. Yeah. So long story short, I took the job. I moved out here in January by myself, and I spent 8 months, 7.5, 8 months here working at the television stations by myself, going back and forth every couple of months. So then Lisa moved out here in August of that year, and we spent another 3+ years here and loved it, made tons of friends, moved back to the Boston area to take care of some parents who needed some care. Yeah. And in December of last year, December of 2023, my friend Scott, who had called me in October of 2012, called me again and said, hey, because let me just, as an aside, my old boss had become the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu.
So your television boss that you loved, that you'd worked for.
He had retired.
While you're back in Boston with Family Matters, now your boss has become the mayor of Honolulu.
He retired, ran for mayor, and won in 2020. So he took office in 2021. Okay. So I got a call from Scott, and he said, mayor's looking, he has a chief of staff, but he's going to move that person into another role, and he'd like you to consider taking the job as a chief of staff.
And as an aside, wasn't Scott someone who you had mentored as well through the ropes?
Scott was,
right? Back to that relationship.
Yeah, Scott was an intern, and then we hired him, and he rose to the ranks and became the news director at the stations that I worked at before.
So then when he needed someone, he came back to you, right? This whole relationship.
Exactly right.
So So I interrupted, but so Scott says, "Hey,
Scott
Rick
is
has
at the
become
time the director of communications for Rick, for
okay
the
for the
mayor.
mayor."
Yeah.
So they called and said, "Andy, I know you're home, but how about coming back?"
And so I immediately thought, and Lisa and I talked about it, and we thought this would be a great time. I was going to probably retire in a couple of years. And so I took it. Yeah, we moved out here in February of 2024. And it's been the greatest joy of my life as far as professionally. It's a very different thing,
Yeah.
which was part of the appeal. Like the challenge,
Yeah.
like every day is just so challenging, and there's so many big issues that we face as the city and county, and that's what we love about it. Those challenges kind of get you out of bed every day, and you try to see how you can make people's lives better. That sounds cliche, but it's absolutely why I hope that's why we're all in it.
Right. I mean, you're making such an impact, and you're looking at all these issues, and really, you're the right hand for the mayor. I think part of it too is building on all those confidences you had throughout your career, right? Like, you don't know the history of Hawaii, you don't know a lot of the issues perhaps from the ground up, but you jump in, you ask a lot of questions, you build those relationships. So it's all these building blocks along the way that sounds like a culmination.
Yeah, again,
for this role.
Asking a lot of questions, being able to communicate with people.
Yeah.
I was in the communications business for a long time. I like to think I know a little bit about it. And the thing that the mayor talked to me about when he and I talked about the job initially before we accepted the job was trust. And I asked him a couple of times, well, what's the job? He said, the job is somewhat undefined, but I need somebody next to me that I can trust.
Nice.
And that's not just me, that's everybody that works for him. There's a level of trust that's really hard to quantify, but it's the building, it's the foundation by which all the other building blocks are assembled.
And I saw quickly his booklet, his leadership booklet, and it's just full of nuggets. And a big one was about trust. And it made me think of there's a lot going on with kind of work from home, or where are you sitting while you're doing your work? And trust comes up so often, where you need a leader that trusts you. You need to show that you are trustworthy. And if you can build that base, it doesn't matter where you're sitting, right? If you can trust each other and respect each other.
Yeah. Well, the trust that I have in him is, unequivocal, and I think he feels the same way about me. And that's where it starts, and that's how we are able to work so well together, I think. Yeah.
And I think, often when I'm talking with people and they're looking at us in our careers now, doing things that we love and that we've enjoyed and that people strive for perhaps, and they say, oh, I could never do that. And they start at the end where we are now versus starting at the beginning where saying, hey, it's not magic, it's momentum. It is taking those small steps. It is continuing to push yourself, have that confidence, speaking up, raising your hand and say, hey, I can do that. I'll give it a try. And I think you've shown that throughout your career.
Yeah, well, 10 years ago, if someone said, you're going to be the chief of staff for the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu, I would have said, have another drink.
Mai Tai.
So I think it's also really important to leave yourself open to the possibilities.
There you go.
And even at my age, I took this job when I was almost 63 years old. And I don't think I ever really thought that I was going to be doing much other than, you get to a certain point in your career and your life and you start thinking, well, this has been a good run and I'll retire and have a good life. And, we have a great family and a lot of really amazing friends. And then this opportunity comes along and instead of saying why, you say, why not?
There you go.
And so that's what I did. And that's what we did together. This is totally a we thing. Mm-hmm. Lisa was as involved in the decision as I was, of course. And she's my biggest supporter. Yeah. And that makes it a lot easier. I didn't feel like I was like dragging her out here again. She has a ton of friends and has a really good life out here and very busy life. So, I look forward to the next 4 years. We just got reelected and
congratulations.
I think it's going to be really exciting and a really nice final chapter in my working life.
You said something that we talk a lot about: believe in the possibilities, and not cutting things off before they happen.
Yeah.
Like go talk with them. Hey, be open to some possibilities. You hadn't thought of this, but again, continuing those relationships.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. Relationships are just so important, and I see that with how the mayor does his job, because he's the busiest person I know. He's just always like got something going on or a meeting, and so much of his success, not just in the television world where he had great success, but now as the mayor about to enter his second term, is about the relationships that he's forged, and the relationships that he's starting and forging anew, right? It's not just all people he's known over the last 30 years that he's been in Hawaii. It's like, okay, I'm meeting new people, and I'm open to the possibility of that person teaching me something or being able to help the city in a way that I hadn't really thought of before. And so he has a really open mind about all of it, and he sort of passes that mindset on to the rest of us.
Or when you're getting up to make a speech or to walk into a new room, do you have something you kind of tell yourself?
Well, when I started this job, I hadn't done a ton of public speaking, and so the first number of times that I did it, I had notes, and I'm sure nervous to a certain degree. And the more you do it, and I see my boss do it all the time, just incredibly skilled public speaker, extemporaneously, just sort of he knows where he is. He knows the crowd of people, and he can just he's magical. So I've learned from him. I watch him, and so I just am much more comfortable doing that stuff now. And it's like playing football. It's reps, It's like you're a tennis player. You just got to bang balls, like a golfer. You're out there on the range every day.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of thing. It's just, you're not a professional athlete, but you have to practice and put the time in.
Yeah. Gets easier, right?
And sometimes it's on the job practice. Yeah. It's not like you're standing in front of the mirror and saying, what am I going to say to the firefighters today?
Getting out there.
You just got to get out there, and
take
sometimes your knees are knocking and your hands are shaking, but you get over that.
Fantastic. Even going back to that pivotal moment when you said, hey, I know this isn't the job for me, to get you to push to kind of take that first step. Any advice for people who may be in a career that they're saying, I know this isn't really what I want, but I'm not quite sure what to do next?
You have to consider the alternative, right? Are you going to sit there in a job that and I was young, but I knew I was not happy in this job. And I knew that as I looked sort of on the horizon to the other opportunities that would be available to me, like they had talked to me about moving into a sales job, and I knew I wasn't a salesperson. So I felt like, well, that's sort of the path they see me on. So I knew that I wasn't taking that path. You just have to kind of give in to the fears sometime. And especially at a young age, but even not, you don't necessarily have to be that young. I know things change when you have kids and you have a family and you have people that you're responsible for. That changes the game. And I've been confronted with those situations in my career too.
Yeah, certain things you do, I just came through it, you do it because you need to pay the bills.
That's right. But especially for young people who have so much, the opportunities for young people now are just so much. It's just technologically, you're plugged into so many different things. So take advantage of that. And as I said earlier, just talk to as many people as you can. And you just never know who's going to light that bulb. And you're going to be, oh, you know what? I think I could be the chief of staff for the mayor. Something as ridiculous as that.
Right.
It can happen for anybody. You just have to have a certain degree of confidence. And if you're lacking in confidence, find some people to talk to that can sort of pump you up a little bit. Don't be afraid. I think so much of our life decisions are made out of fear.
Right.
And
the stories we're telling ourselves, right? Part of me is like, well, what if it all worked out? What if I did, what if I hired myself? What if I just tried or took a step, made a phone call, emailed someone, asked someone who's done it, hey, how did you get started, right? Taking those small steps gets easier with each step.
Absolutely. And this job that I have, just to sort of wrap things up, the question that people asked me when I told them that I was leaving and I was moving to Hawaii to be the chief of staff, they said, well, the first question was, when is his term over? And I said, he's got like another year, less than a year. Well, what if he doesn't get reelected? And I said, well, then we'll probably move back to Boston. So it was like, you know, you take the leap.
Right.
And I knew he was going to get reelected. I had enough confidence in that. But you're never too old or too young to take a chance on yourself.
And we've said a few times over this weekend, too, carpe diem. The fact that I just recently left my job. You know, I have no business hopping on a plane to come to Hawaii, and yet here we are, right? And so it's taking those steps, and you know, carpe diem.
Yeah. Well, Lisa she's the queen of carpe diem, and it is a great support for me, because I, over my life, have been perhaps a little more tentative about things, and she's like, just go, just go. And that's, you know, again, if you have a good support system, it's a lot easier to do that. But even if you don't feel like you have a great support system, and you believe in yourself, then
start building it up.
Take the
Do you
plunge.
have any Hawaiian words you can teach us?
I have
some clean ones.
Sure, yeah. Mahalo means thank you. Aloha means hello and goodbye. And ohana is family, and ohana in Hawaii is everything. And it's a special, special place. And when we were here the first time, it was a place that sort of gets in you. And you're always, no matter how long you live in Hawaii, if you absorb all that it has to offer and you let it seep into you, you always feel like you're part of the ohana. Of this place. So,
well, Andy,
pretty special.
Mahalo. Thank you. And great words of advice from Andy Sugg, Chief of Staff.
It's my pleasure, E.
Thank you so much.
And one other thing, there's no word in Hawaiian for you're welcome. So I can just say, you're welcome.
Well, thank you. Mahalo.